We got money, we got caregiver, we got patient. There are 3 expenses in our profession, and the physical expense is the greatest expense that anyone pays. You can always make more money, and you can always see therapy. But when it comes to the physical expense to the patient, there's very little that we can do if that is a very high expense to that animal.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yesterday, I was talking to our mentee that's in the clinic, and completely unprompted. We were talking about mentorship, and she's doing some work with us on helping develop that program.
Yeah.
And she brought up the fact that it's like all this program is a whole bunch of us saying how we're better than each other. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
she's talking about her veterinary curriculum in school.
In school,
yes.
So basically, that she is on to a certain degree being trained
in school.
In school, between years 2 and 3.
Yep, starting 3 in fall. Yep.
To say how she's better than her classmates that are going through the exact same thing
at the exact same time.
At the exact same time
with the same coursework.
Identical. It's just like they're teaching them this talk path.
Yeah.
As a way to edify themselves.
Absolutely. My
question with that idea is, I believe it's been around for a long time. That thought pattern of teaching people to hold themselves in high regard within this industry has been around longer than the issue of self-care.
Yeah.
The self-care problem and the rate of suicide and all that has surfaced later. Not necessarily that they're correlated.
Yeah.
However, on that side, when you coordinate the fact that, okay, veterinarians and those that work in the veterinary industry are 2 to 3 times more likely to commit suicide.
Yeah, which is insane. Yeah, than the general public,
Coordinate that with our culture that is highly competitive. Yeah. I have to put myself in this hierarchy above you.
Yeah.
Why? It sucks because the education system says, why would I change that? I have to teach these people how to defend themselves.
Right. If they are even acknowledging it as a problem.
That's true.
That's the problem. So I mean, to even build upon that, and that's part of the reason why we've integrated our mentorship program with Michigan State University, is when I went to them and saying, hey, I kind of have this really wild idea. I'm kind of a new budding business, but I've been in the industry for the last decade. I was lucky enough to get out of school when I was 23, because those first 10 years, it was just like, all right, I'm just going to sit and watch.
Right.
So I come to them and I say, we have to do something different. And they say, well, actually, we're trying to do something different. And part of it was exactly that. The university, they had acknowledged that this is a problem and they need to do something about it, because if we start to talk about mental health and we start to talk about engagement, we start to talk about inclusion, we start to talk about all these different things that we need as a team, no one would support them. No one outside of that university setting, and even to some capacity, even within a clinical setting, they didn't have clinicians who were supporting them. I mean, this was pretty much on the administrative side and kind of the dean's office. They were like, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. They wrote grants for it, $1 million grants. Yeah. And they're like, we need to really actively engage our students and try to fix this. This as best as we can. Throw some water on the fire. We might not put it out, but can we at least not make it a brush fire? Right? And that's then when I came in and I said, okay, we're on the same page. I said, what is it going to take to get this done? And they're like, well, we don't really have any money to do it. And I was like, okay, how much money do you actually need?
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, we were hoping to get $1 million, and and put that into an investment account, and generate about $30,000 a year, and that allow us to get the program set up. And I'm like, $30K a year? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, I'll give you $30K a year.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Like, just this guy from northern Wisconsin, grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, from Michigan State University, is just going to shell it out. I'm like, yeah, I'll dedicate 5 years to it. Well, why would you do that? I said, because we have to do something different.
Right.
If you as a university are saying that you have identified this problem that I identified in private practice, and we're coming together on this idea, and everyone else you've tried to engage isn't doing it, I'll put my money where my mouth is, simply because, I mean, one, I have no value in money. It's kind of a weird thing, like, to me.
Well, when you made your nut, it's just a tool.
It's a tool, exactly. And that's exactly how I saw it. I said, this is a tool for change. This is a way for us to say, we're going to integrate to the university, and we're going to make a better place for students. And I had an ex-coworker. She had said to me, she's like, why would you give them that much money? I said, I want to help people that I've never met before and I'll never meet again, or that I'll never have the opportunity to meet, because it's the ideal. It's this change in that university setting. So to answer your question, sort of your statement is saying, why would the university change? It's like they have to even acknowledge that it's a problem. And if they are unwilling to acknowledge that it's even a problem, because when I talked to MSU, they had said, so there's exit interviews, right? So exit interviews is basically when you come out of vet school, they're going to interview you, what's your experience? And they said their exit interviews for the last 15 years have changed none. It's the same exit interview for 15 years. We hated it. This was terrible. It negatively impacted my life. I got a divorce because I was so unhappy. I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this. What did I actually get out of it? It hadn't changed. 15 years.
Yeah.
And so they have to acknowledge that. So why did it go on for 15 years? Why did it have to go that long before someone stepped up and said, because it's incredibly hard.
It is.
We have tradition, we have the onset of corporate, and we have this other third thing that we're building. And tradition, if we're saying that it comes up in the university setting, now what? Now what if that's what we're taught in? And what are we supposed to? But we're taught the wrong skills. Is that we taught, how to, again, problem solve and do, veterinary related tasks. But in the end, we haven't been taught culture. We haven't been taught business strategy. We haven't been taught self-worth. We haven't been taught a lot of these things. And that was actually the story with our current mentee. Is it honest to God, I didn't even realize the impact I was having. And I think I told you before, I mean, it really honestly brought tears to my eyes. So she had come into our company as sort of just like a passerby. It was just her boyfriend was up here doing some work with the medical school through Wisconsin. But anyway, she was just passing by the clinic. Hey, there's a 24-hour clinic. I wonder if they have anything I can do for the summer. And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, the mentorship program was rudimentary. It was not really that developed, but it was like, yeah, we can figure something out for you. Just come hang out. We'll always take help. And one of my big things was, okay, I can volunteer and so on and so forth. I'm like, first of all, no one in our company falls on their sword. I said, if you're working here, you will get paid, and your pay is going to be an acceptable. It's not going to be minimum wage. It's going to be an acceptable rate that we pay our employees, and you're going to make some money this summer. Yep. So, wow. And you're going to have benefit, whatever it happens to be that way, living stipend if you need it, those types of things. And we just did our thing. Yeah. It was just for the summer. That's just what the summer was. It was like, yep, come meet what we are, come see what we are, come with this, come this, come this, come this. And then she's like, this has been an amazing experience for the summer. I'm like, it was great having you up here. I really enjoyed it. And then about a month went by, and we got a card in the mail, and it was from her. And I opened it. It was like, oh, pretty nice thank you card. We get thank you cards. You're like, yeah, all right, But so I'm reading through it, and it's like, and it was like the same moment, like my heart sank, but then was immediately filled with the most amount of joy I've ever had in a very, very long time. I mean, aside from there's happy things like your kids are born and that kind of thing. Professional joy. Exactly. Because up to her coming in, I've been working 100-hour weeks. I've been busting ass. I've been trying to do everything to get this company off the ground from my vision, because the business was running, but at least to get it to where it needs to not be this, but to be the third thing we're trying to create. Lots of long hours, and it's just you put all this work into it, and it hurts when people speak ill of it. But for me, it's if you speak ill of it, perfect. Where's the problem? Where's the solution? How can I implement it? So please talk trash, because I'll figure a way to fix that.
Yep.
But the letter was that. Because she was a first year becoming a second year vet student. So it was that first to second year. And basically the context of the letter was, I was out. Yeah. I was done. She's like, the first year of vet school was terrible. I'm unhappy. My mental health is terrible. And the clinics that I've worked at in the past, the veterinarians are stressed the hell out. They're trying to run a business, but they can't. They work long hours. They hate their jobs, but they can't get out because of the debt, right? They can't get out, and the culture's terrible, and they're getting negative reviews, and their staff hates them. They hate the staff, whatever happens to be. She's like, I had no idea. I had no idea that was the state of the affairs in the profession. And she's like, but I thought it was just one place.
Right.
You know, and it's like, but then there's another one like that. And, you know, she's in the vet schools like this and this, like, and she's like, this is it for me. She was like, if this summer experience was as negative as all my prior experiences were been, she's like, I wouldn't have done second year vet school.
Right.
There's no sense in me continuing to suffer negatively, mental health, to accrue more debt. I'll just figure out something else to do. And she's like, but working with you and your team for 2.5 months, 3 months, she says, not only have I completely become rejuvenated for my joy in this profession, but I only want to work with you and your team.
Right.
And that was it. That was it. I'm even now. I'm doing good now because I've said it enough times.
Yeah.
But it was one of those moments where I was like, holy shit, we're making a difference.
Yep.
You know, it's just that little tweak, that little, you know, the little person coming in, they're just looking for something for, you know, nothing. And you didn't, you know, as a business, we didn't really invest a whole lot to recruit this person. It was a passerby, but it was the right time. It was the right time for her. It was the right time for us. It was the right time where it was like, I needed that boost to say, just don't stop.
Yep.
Just don't stop. And she needed that boost because just don't stop.
Yeah.
Just keep going. There's an incredible amount to happen in this profession. We're all moving west. Just come with us. We need leaders. We need more people on the wagon train. We have to move west.
Yeah. It's funny too because from as a third party in that engagement, I had met her just one day for an hour.
Sure.
And it was within her first week.
Yeah.
Which you guys had integrated as a part of your onboarding process.
Yeah.
Reason being, culture was number one.
Yeah.
Because you understood this shit's broken.
Yeah.
So we need to just keep trying stuff.
That's
different.
Yeah.
Like, let's see what fits. Let's see what doesn't. Like, we're just going to have to build a new toolbox for this third system that hasn't, I mean, to a point, no shape at that point, and now it's starting to get there because you continue to try stuff.
Yeah, right.
And I remember in that conversation, you know, we had done enough of those assessments where it's like I kind of know typically what we're looking at industry wide. Yeah, had over 100 samples of just what do these data points look like for those that are listening or watching.
In the TriCore assessment.
It's 3 parts: behavioral, motivational, as well as sort of how your brain takes in data.
Yeah.
Industry wide, or at least through your company, it was I kind of know what I'm looking at. Then I saw a person that didn't match that.
Right.
And then, like, I didn't know her situation.
No.
I didn't know that she would, and I don't know if many of us really did.
No, God, none of us did. It was just, we have a mentee for the summer. Cool.
Right.
You know, there was no pressure.
And the funny part about it was, just from my perspective as an outsider, was like, you're different. And I told her, that was like the first thing I told her. I was like, you have this set of traits that's not going to align very closely with those that are very heavy in your industry.
Yep.
You're a more direct personality. Yep. You're probably going to get called a bitch a lot.
Yep.
A lot. Yep. Because you're willing to be more direct.
Yeah, and I love bitches.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. Because there's no guessing.
Yeah, no. I love direct talkers.
Yes.
You know.
So she's got that. Her motivational profile was much different. Yep. And she was a systems thinker. She wasn't very much of a black and white type person. Which those 3 things compared to the industry, almost exact opposites.
Yep.
And not to say that the opposite doesn't have value. It's just a different type of value.
Correct.
And there's a high volume of it.
Correct.
So you take that, and then I look at her, and I'm just like, you just need to learn how to be you.
Right.
Like, if whether or not that's in this industry or somewhere else, if you try to go away from who you are. Yeah. It's going to suck. Absolutely. You're not going to like it. No. So in this industry, what you're going to get is a lot of influence saying you can't be that. Yep. And I had seen that in a number of different industries with a number of different people because they were being coached out of who they are. Yep. And that's one of the most stressful things that we don't realize happens. Yeah. Yep. When you tell me, like for me, if you were to tell me to be less engaging, as an example,
which, I mean, that would be terrible.
It would be ridiculous, right?
Let's just hypothetically.
But that's my leading trait. Like, I love to be engaging. I love to talk. I love to create good experiences for people. Put me in an environment where you curb that and say, well, actually, just do this. Do your job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm demotivated. I'm out
Done.
real quick.
Yeah.
So she was in a similar spot, but not realizing it.
Yeah.
Because no one had provided her that set of variables
Yeah.
where it's like, oh yeah, that's why I'm different.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and
That's
then,
why Tricore's so powerful.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you take that, and then when you prep the team, at least on the administrative level, that to handle the majority of the mentorship, guidance, and all.
Yeah.
Like she had worked with a number of different folks that didn't understand, at least on a data level, that she was that different. But from you, Katie and Annie, you guys knew, and you treated her appropriate to what her style was.
Yeah.
And then you get that letter months later.
Right.
It's like, oh,
Totally unknown.
yeah. And it worked.
Right.
And that's when you take that moment of like, yep, you have culture, and going back to the idea of this corporate level.
Yep.
Corporate culture is completely unindividualized. It is group-based culture. It is trying to coach you into fitting our company model. It's a war of attrition. And what it does is it breeds groupthink, because you like, let's take our bond alignment. If you take corporate medicine and you have one individual bond alignment, and you end up all on one way, there's only one way to do it, and it just feeds itself. So on our side, it's like, nope, horribly individualized.
Terribly. Yeah. We
to
need
the point where,
individualization, right?
yes, and there's a lot of work involved in that. And there's a lot of maintenance involved in that too, because when you have people that are treated as individuals and they're not super skilled in communication, all that sort of stuff, you're going to have conflict also. So you have your front end and you have your back end. And I think the reason that corporate goes away from it is mostly due to the back end, because dealing with conflict especially from a higher level is very, very difficult. But that doesn't work. Clearly, you had somebody who's, I would say she's has an extreme level of potential. Very, very intelligent. And now that she's bought in, it's like, ooh, boy, she's going to be dangerous in this industry in a great way.
Absolutely.
Very effective, going to be very direct, and is going to be able to hit this alignment spectrum. So we're going to be able to understand culture better than if we were to have somebody that came in 5 years into the industry or something like that.
Yeah. Once they've kind of been sort of set in tradition. It's very hard to.
But the reason that it worked is because she bit on the idea of culture from day one, within our model. So, number one, that's friggin' awesome,
right?
But number two, how do you get to do that, or how do you teach other people to do that?
Right.
And that's the question for, I think, Michigan State. Because you've got this house system it's like it's touching that. It's not quite dove into that to a certain level, but that's the idea, and that's why you bought into it, because that's what's broken. We're trying to group these kids, and there is a part of it definitely from, you see over 100 of these. They're being coached to be motivated in a certain way and to behave in a certain way, and for their brains to work black and white, gray, whatever, high empathy. There's definitely coaching, because we see it across the board with vets, techs, MS, or our medical support staff. There's a coaching level, which is like, then you have to break it. You have to get to the true person, and then engage that person. So if we can do that a step before they get here, which is the mentorship level, and even like constantly within the education system, that's, to me, is the first step in breaking this culture piece. Because then I'm not disparaged anymore. Because the other thing too about knowing yourself is knowing your flaws. That's one of my favorite conversations to have with people. Is, yes, you have a lot of strengths. Let's say you're a part of the typical 80%. There's a lot of strengths in there. Here's where your weaknesses are. You're going to have to talk about them. Let's talk about them. Let's get them out on the table. Let's figure out how you're going to manage them, because I'm not going to tell you to not be that. I'm not going to tell you to be something else to mitigate your weaknesses. It's like, no, just understand them. And then know the person that doesn't have those weaknesses, work together. Why? Just steer into your strengths. Don't worry about your weaknesses. Just figure out how to deal with it. You're actually a very good example of that, especially as of late. Because you've gotten to the point where you're I don't know if you've noticed, you're exceptionally more willing to delegate. I know. I know a part of it was out of necessity. because you can only work so much.
Right. I agree. I've gotten a lot better at delegating.
But it's tough for a lot of people, especially those that have a business owner mindset, because there's trust included in that.
Yeah.
But that idea of steering into your strengths, knowing what they are, accepting them, and knowing what other people's strengths are. When you brought Annie onto the team, that was the first go of like, oh yeah, she's really good at that stuff.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm going to empower and engage you on that level as much as I can, because then we can be twice as strong.
Yep.
And when you hit that disparagement side of, I'm going to knock you off your pedestal a little bit, and then I'm going to bring you back up onto it. And but it's going to be in a much more humble way.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the biggest difference is you can be on a pedestal. You can understand that you have a level of knowledge that most people don't have. You're able to provide value that most people can't get anywhere else. You certainly, you might be able to get the same information from Google, but the value of the direction isn't there. So have all of that, but also be humble about it.
Right.
Understand that there are all of these other parts included. Understand the fact that your caregivers do not have that level of education, and you have to guide them within this bond spectrum.
Right.
And this is how you're going to do it. This is how you're going to tend to behave. And guess what? Other caregivers, they're not going to like you all the time.
Yeah, no.
You just have to be okay with that.
Right.
You're just going to have to be yourself.
Yeah.
If you hit 80% of the time, 90% of the time, that's a glaring success.
Absolutely.
If you miss on 10% just because of you were being yourself, because that even happens with you. There are some caregivers that just do not align with you.
Hate my guts.
Right.
I'm the most terrible person on the face of the planet.
Right.
Oh,
Just check Google.
Right. Please do.
Please do. Because I remember when I was more on the third party level, a few of those complaints, getting the full context. It's like, well, for me, you didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
But they just didn't get it.
That's
that 10% that's just not, they're just not going to match up with you because of something. That didn't make you go away from who you are.
Right.
It actually edified you to a point, because it's like, oh man, I really did what I was me.
Right.
In that moment.
Right.
And medically I didn't do anything incorrectly.
Correct. Yep.
So you take all of that. So the disparagement that's hit on that, in terms of the failed engagement. I'm teaching people how to engage through that thing.
Right. And I think, I kind of laugh because, we talk about tradition, we talk about corporate, we talk about kind of this separate thing that we're doing, Paw Health. I think one of the really, really good critiques to a sort of individual-based team is that individuals can't work together. So, so let's say you have, sort of corporate look down and saying, well, that's never going to work, because how can you maintain individualism and still have a team? Right. And it's like, well, first of all, that's exactly what we're doing. Two, it's working like hell. I mean, it's fantastic. Yeah. But I think that you can take that, and there's kind of two ways you can go with it. So one, corporate is going to say that's trash, that'll never work. But I think when you look at it and saying, okay, well, we are really trying to maintain individuality. We're trying to find out, and that's why the TriCore is so effective, is you learn, like, you can do a behavior assessment, Myers-Briggs. I mean, there's all these things out there doing behavior assessments, and who are you as a person. But the nice thing about the TriCore is, like you said, it really helps you focus on not just who you are, but how you integrate into the team. On an individual level. We're not talking about on spectrum, we're talking about individual level, how you integrate in the team, what motivates you, and how do you act in that capacity. But I think, so you can have individuals who take this mindset of culture and saying, well, I'm just being me. I'm just being me, and I can do that because I'm just being me. And it's like, well, yes and no. We definitely want you to be yourself, but also acknowledge that there are certain parts of you that are stronger than others, and those stronger parts are what we're trying to pull out. But we're also going to identify these weaknesses to say these weaknesses are not just because we're telling you how bad you are. It's because these weaknesses are going to give us opportunities for growth. Right. And I think when we start to then talk about core values, and we start to talk about what our process is, we talk about our performance system and so on and so forth, that's what we're talking about. Is these weaknesses, and like you said, I agree with you. It wasn't actually you may or may not remember back, but when we originally started working together, it was actually really hard for me to accept what those weaknesses were without feeling like they were personal attacks. Right. It's damn near impossible. It's a knee-jerk reaction.
But you were taught to do that in school.
Right.
You're trying to knock me off this pedestal in any way. I'm going to defend it. I'm going to fight it. And that's not just a medical school thing.
No,
that's everybody.
Yeah, that's everybody. And, I think once you said, so I had made some growth, recently delegating tasks and trusting the team and so on and so forth. But I think that's one of the more significant things that I've learned in the last couple of years of us working together is, why am I allowing certain situations and certain people to touch me? Why am I allowing that person who clearly doesn't understand what we were talking about? And, some of my worst complaints, honest to God, some of my worst complaints have come for cases where I've put 5 hours into those people.
Right.
Where I've spent the amount of time on I remember one, it was between phone calls, hospitalized patient to in-person consultations. I mean, I had tallied up the time, and it was 90-minute phone calls at a time. And I had put at least 8 hours into these people. I got a board complaint against the state. And of course, nothing was upheld because there was nothing done wrong medically, but it was still that thing where, it just crushed me. I'm like, I did all of this work and these people still weren't happy. And they were unhappy because their terminal patient died. I mean, that was the context of the conversation. We still hospitalized and we did what they wished and so on and so forth. But anyway, part of that was then coming into, I'm like, wait a second, but why am I actually allowing this to impact me negatively? And it's like, I don't necessarily respect these people at all.
Right.
So if I have no respect for them and they have no respect for me, then why am I actually allowing their disrespect to affect me? And it was done.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not that I'm untouchable, because I think we all have the ability to learn. I think we all have the capability of making mistakes. I think we all have the ability to accept our weaknesses, and those weaknesses and strengths will change over time. And I think that's part of what our team is we just learn to work together as individuals, and it works.
Yeah.
It's an environment that it does. And I think, I had my first experience with that when I was in veterinary school, where I had gotten through my preclinicals. It was the very first rotation I had ever been on where I'm actually seeing patients, and I was excited. And it was full blown high Carlo. It was like, like, hey guys, nice to meet you. Yep. Handshake. Oh my God, I'm here. You guys are here. And that was day 1 of this rotation. Day 2, the head of the rotation, which is, quote unquote, the scariest person in the hospital.
Yep.
Took me to her office and sat me down. And I'm like, hey, what's going on, doctor? What's going on? And she's like, I just want to be clear. I'm like, oh yeah, perfect. Okay. Yep. And she's like, I want to be clear. I don't like you. And I was like, okay. And she was like, the way you carry yourself, you're a little too cavalier. She's like, the way that you talk, the way that you address people, it leaves a really bad taste in people's mouth. What are you, the Fonz? And I'm just like, I'm just sitting there and I'm just looking at her and I'm like, I was totally flabbergasted.
Right.
It totally caught me off guard. And like the way she was talking, there were smirks and, I could look in her eyes, I could see in her eyes, and I'm like, I said to her, nah, you like me. I said, you like me. And she's like, what? And I'm like, no, I can see it in you. You like me. And I said, part of what you don't like in me is what you wish you could be. And then I failed the rotation. So, but I saw it in her. I saw this individual who I could tell she had a very caring demeanor about her, because obviously she's in the university level, treating patients, dealing with caregivers. Right. And I could see it in her. And I'm like, oh, I'm not playing the game.
Yeah.
I'm not playing that part that you were constructed to be, and now you're upset because I'm doing it. Right. I'm not doing what you're supposed to do here.
Right.
Failed the rotation, and I was like, okay, fine. I'll play the game for the next 2 years.
Yep.
I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to go do whatever the hell I want.
Right.
But it never touched me. And that was the first time. And I think part of what it was is it was like, I didn't know who this person was. I didn't know why they were talking to me this way, but I knew who I was, and I knew the value that I had and could. It was in its very infant state. I understand now, after us working together and the things we were doing, I understand that I have an infinite more amount of value than I had when I was in veterinary school, for the fundamentals that we can establish and what we're doing from a business standpoint and industry-wide things. But back then I could feel it.
Yeah.
Now I have more construct to here's the things that I can bring to the table. But it was like, why are you touching me right now?
Well, that's the thing though. Like I'm the same way, and I've had instances in my life where somebody's tried to knock me off of that high engagement level.
Yeah.
And depending on the construct, horribly demotivational. Like you probably showed up to those and didn't really. I mean, you cared because there were patients there.
Yeah,
but in terms of engagement, it's like, fuck it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Why do I care?
Yeah, right.
And I've been in the same spot, but this is my fear with something like that, and I've seen it in different industries with different people. is you take somebody that's high engaging like that, and I'm very empathetic to that because I'm out of 100, I'm a 99 in terms of I, which is that outgoing, engaging nature.
Yeah, yeah. High ultra high.
Ultra high.
Yeah.
And my high empathy with that leads to a fear that when we teach people to not be that, they're that sometimes, and then when they're not, they're really not.
Yeah.
And when I call it the curse of the high I, is when I'm not super engaging, people think I'm really mad.
Yeah.
Really mad. And there are days that I am, but there are some days I'm low energy or whatever it might be. I just don't quite have the juice that I normally have.
Right.
I don't put as much into the team as I normally do.
Right.
And then people think I'm pissed.
Right.
Super pissed. So you take somebody like you, but that doesn't have the perspective of like, that's just me. So I'm going to survive this, and then I'm going to go be it again.
Survive mode, right.
You take, because we have a few folks on the team that are actually in a similar boat, but didn't have the perspective to be like, no, I'm gonna get through this, and I'm gonna be the high I that I am. Yeah. And then when they get pissed, everyone on the teams, or when they drop that engagement level, everyone thinks that they're mad. Yeah. And then they can't be approached. Right. Or they don't approach them. They can very much be approached.
Yeah, they can be. But it's the perception.
It's the perception. Because holy shit, is that a hard barrier to get over? Yeah. Because if you're mad at me, why do I want to walk up to you?
Yeah.
So if you were taught that from an immediate get-go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of the disparagement,
Right.
And,
right. But that just leads, I mean, there's number one, there was that, but number two, then you were taught a horrible lack of humility.
Oh,
because what did that person do? She just swung her dick around and was just like, nope, you're going to listen to me.
Right. Right.
Because this is what I have, and this is what you don't have.
Right.
And maybe the day that you have it, you can go do this to somebody else.
Yeah.
How effective is that?
Yeah. In a teaching environment.
Right.
Like that's the part for me that like I will accept that behavior in a corporate environment because that is my expectation in corporate America. I have that expectation in corporation of hierarchy, people with power, subservient nature to the employment regime. I mean, that is how I see corporate America. Not our corporate, but the corporate America in general. Mm-hmm. You can't put that in a university. You can't have that in a university. You can't have that hierarchy there where it's supposed to teach. It's like, I think about, my oldest daughter, she's about to go into first grade. And it's like her going and trying to learn mathematics. And it's the teacher being like, you know what? You're terrible at math. And she's like, but I'm here trying to learn math.
Right.
Like, I'm here trying to learn how to read. I'm here trying to learn the color wheel. I'm trying to learn these. Well, you're pretty terrible at it.
Right.
And I'm going to be the one who has the information for you. And one day you'll have it, but it is not today. So you might as well just listen to what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Where?
Well, and definitely don't smile your way through it.
No.
Don't be nice.
No.
Don't be engaging.
No.
I don't like you because of one behavioral trait. Right. And now I'm telling you that you suck at it. Yeah. I'm telling you don't behave the way that you normally do or want to.
Yeah. 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 And think about it on the elementary level. What happens then in just like a group of students where then you have students who are struggling?
Adderall.
Pretty much.
Adderall happens.
Because the students aren't helping each other.
Right.
And that's, I'm not going to get into my whole, gripes with the, education system, but I've always felt the education system should also be a group approach. It's like, it doesn't matter in a school system, an education system, you're always going to have the smart kids.
Yeah.
You're always going to have the kids that are less intelligent. Those kids are still going to be there. There's no reason why you're not still going to have oil separating on water when it comes to level of intelligence. But what if there's an opportunity from an education standpoint at a very, very young age where it's all done together? Mm-hmm. Stop the standardized testing. Stop. Just there's going to be people where not everyone's going to be able to be a doctor. Not every doctor can be a mechanic.
No,
not every doctor can, the front end of their own clinic.
Right.
So for me, it's, I highly value trade jobs. I highly value those students who right out of school are going right into trade. I mean, Mike Rowe has a whole system that, he's doing even at the high school level. My mom and both my parents have been educators for, decades at this point. They just retired. My mom, I think, like 35 years. My dad with 20-some years of teaching. And one of the things that they integrated in towards the end is Skills USA. I don't know if you're familiar with Skills USA.
Yep.
Yeah, Skills USA. Bunch of high school students learning trade work. that is an amazing thing for students because it teaches them the value of where the jobs are,
Right.
of where the income is, of where don't get debt, don't do this, do something that'll make you money, make you happy, have a good family, and move on with your life. It's the same. That's what I'm saying. So in the elementary school level, it's you would never consider putting an environment together where there isn't absolute support among students and teachers and administrators. Same thing applies to the high end of the education level. These are still kids. I'm sorry. These are still kids. Fine, they're graduating veterinary school and technical school in their mid-20s. But honestly, I think about myself coming out of vet school at 23, and I look backwards now on that. I'm 37 in a week. I just look back and I'm like, oh, I was such a baby.
Right.
Like the amount
Just
of
naive to the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which it was actually good. It was good being that naive coming out of school because I was still me. I hadn't been broken yet.
Right.
And that's, I think, part of when we start to talk about how you fix culture, you fix it early. And when we talk about the hurricane, talk about the tornado, this is that whole side we're talking about. If we can fix culture at the university level, at the teaching level, before these specialists come out, before these veterinarians come out, before these technicians come out, if we can fix just that part, we have done so much for the profession.
Right.
And then we start to look at popping through the hurricane, and now we're starting to not even put students into the hurricane. Now we're saying, guess what? You're coming out of school, and guess what you're on? You're on cleanup crew.
Yeah.
We're here to clean up the aftermath of the profession.
Right.
We're here to clean up the aftermath of the destruction. You don't have to go through what we went through. Just because we went through that doesn't mean you need to go through that because we went through that. This is not
It's not a rite of passage.
it's not a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what's going to happen if we can fix the university side. But until we can, and Michigan State is doing a fantastic job trying to start out fixing that university side, and it's being received with wild success, is that now we're saying on the business side, we're saying, guess what? We are now building the culture that you have been sort of groomed into. And guess what? You can come in when you're students, first year students, second year students, third, fourth year students, preclinical, postclinical, technicians, veterinarians. Just learn it. Come for a week, come for a month, come for whatever it is. We'll pay your travel. We don't care. Just come check it out. Just hang out with us. It's the mentee story.
Yeah.
It's just come in and learn what it is. So,
Right.
So that's really, I mean, I know we kind of touched a little bit on some of our mentorship and core values and some of these other things, engagement, but when you kind of have this conversation, which I'm sure has spanned about 2 hours now, is that is culture.
Right.
That is a cultural problem with our profession. And you can write a book on it. You can definitely, but for as many touches, as many connections as there are, as many parts as there are to that particular web that is just culture, there's a lot of work to be done. But the fundamentals to correct it, the fundamentals to fix it, they're actually pretty basic.
Yeah.
And like you've said, they've been proven in other industries to work.
Yeah. One of the books that I would recommend everybody read and is in our clinic is The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, because he wrote the book on it. And it's so funny because the entire book sources around 2 variables. Now, you're talking about a highly complex system of managing a culture.
Yeah.
2 variables: safety and vulnerability.
Right.
Is it safe for me to share?
Yeah.
And can I be vulnerable within that environment?
Yeah,
I cannot have one without the other.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes it so complicated.
Yes.
Because as soon as my safety goes down, my vulnerability goes down.
Yeah.
And as soon as that goes down, I have to create more structure
to
try and make you feel safe. And then it can spiral down.
Yeah.
But it can also spiral back up.
Yeah.
It's highly volatile if you're not controlling it.
Yeah.
But that's it. It's 2 variables.
Yeah.
Like he does go on to talk about humility and one other one that I can't think of offhand. But that's it.
Yeah.
And you talk about all of these things that within our failed culture, and it's like they completely go against it. You weren't able to be vulnerable in that environment straight out of school.
No, and actually the only safety, if you want to talk about culture, the only safety that I had in veterinary school was probably 2 or 3 very, very close friends.
Right.
And part of, me, of course, having that I component is, every weekend you would just plan on Riolo throwing some type of party, whether it was tailgate, whether it was, truthfully, for years, some of the students were Second Lifers, so they came back to a college environment in their late 20s. They had worked for a period of time. And, for me, it was all part of that, hey, let's just be happy. Let's just be together.
Right.
And that was where a lot of people were really sort of banking on those times where it's like, we're just going to go over to Carlo's and we're just going to unwind. It doesn't matter what we unwind. We are just going to be ourselves.
Right.
Because in his environment that he has created for us outside of veterinary school is we're just going to be ourselves for this time period.
Right. And I would say too, just to kind of source it with the book, is in that environment, there's probably a little bit of whiskey involved, whatever. But regardless, if you had a conversation or there were 2 other individuals that weren't you having a conversation about a new idea, how was that idea received? There was probably a likely critical nature to it because that's the way we all think. Yeah. But it wasn't critical for the point of just knocking you down. It wasn't disparagement. No. It was, how can we make it better?
Absolutely.
And that breeds vulnerability.
Absolutely.
That's safety. Safe spaces are different.
Yep.
Because that's nope, I'm just going to see all of your vulnerabilities and I'm going to put a big old shell around it.
Right.
And that doesn't work.
No.
But that's the difference is, Pixar was one of the examples in the book. So when they had originally pitched Toy Story, which was the first movie of Pixar,
right.
Steve Jobs tore it apart. And he said, this is how you can make it better.
Right.
Go do it. And when you come back, I'm going to be extremely grateful and I'm going to reward you for making this better. And they were empowered.
Yep.
Versus the other side, here's a new idea.
Yep.
I don't like it.
Yep.
Done.
Right. I absolutely agree with that perspective or that particular example because that is what our performance growth is. For me, in one of our doctors who it took us about a year and a half to kind of get her around the bend a little bit, but she had texted me here. We were kind of conversing back and forth because some of it was in person as well. But part of it was she's like, I feel like I'm starting to fall back on old behavior, and she's like, I feel like I'm going down this spiral. I feel like these things are starting to creep back in. I've made so much progress over I've made more progress in the last 3 months than I've made in the last year and a half, 18 months. And she said, but I feel like I'm going backwards. And I said, well, hold on a second here. First of all, we can never have the expectation of constant improvement.
Right.
You can never just always get better.
No.
I said, so you have to accept that as the natural ebb and flow of personal development, you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have move forwards. I said, but the reality is, I said, never ever be afraid of failure. Never ever be afraid of a setback. I said, because what that allows us to do, one, we're going to own it. 2, we're going to find out what those variables are. This was bad, this was bad, this was bad. What's our solutions to that, and how can we implement it?
Right.
And that's part of the TED dynamic, and the empowerment triangle and our empowerment dynamic is basically saying when you start to see these people who are self-victimizing, and you can grab them and pull them up, sort of into this next realm. And you can coach them into that and saying, I don't really care whether or not you fail. I don't, because at least we now have a new set of variables to work on.
Right.
And that's how I wake up every single day. What didn't I get done yesterday that I really wanted to get done yesterday? I'm a failure because I didn't get it done. But what variable do I need to change in order to make it get done by the end of today? And that's part of then what I learned from you is just that exact point. You say, oh, you're so much better at delegating now. I'm more willing to accept what I've failed at, and from that failure, the solution then comes into who can I delegate it to? That's the solution to my failure. I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm working 80, 90 hours a week. I understand there's only so much I'm going to be able to do. And that's how we always started. I mean, we had kind of branched off from the traction model, but that was like every single meeting. We were meeting like every 2 weeks, was it? Something like that. Every 2 weeks, it was like, let's see what we failed on this time.
Right.
And it's like, what did we get done? Yeah, perfect. Checkbox. But yeah, fine. Okay, that part's done. But what didn't we do? And I'm like, oh, goddamn. It's like, these meetings. I'm looking at Katie. I'm like, maybe you got less done than I did, so you look like you didn't get as much done, And it's like, so there is that kind of in the beginning. But then as I've kind of learned the process, so now it kind of comes the other way, is now being highly in the implementation phase or implementation level of accountability. For me, it's like, like Dr. Caroline, when we were kind of having the online discussion.
Yeah.
which is awesome. I love when coworkers and stuff post things and we have big long conversations about it. And her whole thing was sort of the gray area. She's, oh, there's so much gray area. There's so much on this particular point. There's so much gray area, and I'm having a hard time. And like for me, it's always like that reset where I was like, oh, hey, Caroline. No, I was there 3 years ago. Ben and I, Ben has a lot more knowledge than I do on this particular point, but I'm black and white now. I said, I can see why it's not gray. It is actually several different factors of black and white, and that's all that it is.
Right.
And then that's when her final comment to that was like, it's like, I'm nauseated by your, what was it? What did she write?
Well, I was extremely direct about like the points basically not providing any level for nuance.
Correct. Yes.
And that's all that she was hoping for was like, how do we manage this within this nuance? And the shitty part about managing something within a gray area is it's really hard to implement a solution. Yeah. Because you have like, this will work some of the time, but some of the time it's gonna, and that's why I didn't disagree with her that nuance existed.
No.
There's a lot of
gray area exists.
Absolutely.
Yes. In this one particular point, a lot of gray area exists, but there are very black and white, solutions, and there are ways we can implement it, and we're the team to do it. And that's what
it does drive her nuts.
Yeah,
and I've done it to her in person too, where it's like, no, Caroline, this is just what it is. You can. One of the things that she does talk about openly, and I respect, is just her constant battle with like anxiety and her mental state.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And I looked at her last time that she was at the clinic, and I worked with her. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
You're a great doctor.
Absolutely.
You have all of the skills.
Absolutely.
You're extremely well engaged with people.
Yeah.
You're humble.
Yeah.
What are you scared of?
Right.
Somebody not liking you? What's the worst? One of the things that I will give my friend Jen a lot of credit on. Yeah. Because I used to have a similar issue. Because of being high I want everyone to like me.
Right.
What's the absolute worst thing that can happen?
Right.
The absolute worst. Yeah. They don't like me and they never talk to me ever again. That's it. Yeah. Guess what? I have a whole lot of people that really, really like me. And I just focus on that now.
Yeah. It's a self-correcting problem. If they don't like you and they're not going to talk to you ever again, perfect. You don't have to talk to them ever again.
Exactly.
It's a self-correcting
You just have
issue.
to be willing to let them not like you.
Absolutely.
And she had referred to it more within the industry.
Yep.
Because one of the ways that you can get a caregiver to like you is by treating their patient to the point that they're back to health. Right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen. Clearly, I mean, 1 out of 5 is like they're just not going to leave.
Yes.
And she struggles with it because she wants to treat the patients to the point where that engagement with somebody never happens on a negative level.
Yep.
And that creates anxiety for her.
Yes.
And it's like, oh,
yeah.
You just gotta just take your level of thinking up one extra level. Yeah. And I'm going to be extremely black and white with you about this piece because I need to get you up here. Mm-hmm. Just let this be straightforward so that you can have more nuance up top. Yeah. Be gray above it.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, for me as a practicing veterinarian, over the last 13 years or 14 years or whatever it is, I think the thing that there's a couple of fundamentals that I've learned. The first one is everyone gets care.
Yes.
They may not get care with us in our clinic under sort of the variables that we have. They may not get it. But if we can do a little bit to make sure the patient has the best quality of life until they can find care somewhere else, fantastic. Sometimes that's as much as needs to get done, and you can walk away from that engagement feeling that you've at least done something.
Right.
So first one is everyone gets care somewhere.
Right.
Second part is there's actually a lot of pride. There's a lot of sort of respect. There's a lot of, I don't want to say positivity, but there's actually a lot to be said for actually being able to euthanize an animal.
Yeah.
And I think when we start to look at these diseases and whatever the disease happens to be, whether it's trauma to end stage failure to somewhere between, even behavioral issues to overpopulation to, all these different things, all these different fundamentals we have that lead towards, these different scenarios that lead towards euthanasia. They don't have it on the human side.
Nope.
Humans have to suffer it out until the end. dying with dignity has started to finally creep into certain states. But I think for us is, when I start to look at euthanasia and saying not every case, 1 in 5 cases statistically in our particular setting, 24-hour care, 1 in 5 is going to be euthanized. But for me, it's 1 in 5 patients we can end their suffering.
Right.
So
and that's right in the veterinarian's oath.
Yep.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I believe it's the second sentence
Yeah.
is to mitigate suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's then, for me, it's like everyone's going to get care somewhere, and euthanasia is it is always an acceptable treatment course to reduce pain and suffering. And that's what I tell people. I say our job as veterinarians is to reduce pain and suffering. Sometimes we can reduce pain and suffering with surgery. Sometimes we can reduce pain and suffering with medical management. Sometimes we can reduce pain and suffering with early disease detection or with preventative disease. There's ways we can reduce pain and suffering, but euthanasia is a very, very finite way that we can reduce pain and suffering.
Right.
And when I talk about that with people, I say there's 3 expenses in our profession. The first expense is obvious. And I say this to people, the first expense is financial. So that's how deep are your pockets, how big is your wallet. Now, we have done a considerable amount of work in this world for financing, to payment agreements, to all these different things. So there's a lot that we're doing there, which will come in when we start to talk about service. The first one is financial expense. That's totally obvious. The next one is emotional expense. This has nothing to do with the patient. This has everything to do with the caregiver.
Right.
So it's what is their bond alignment? What is their attachment? What is the way in which they see their, is it a religious thing? Whatever happens to be. Sometimes you have very high emotional situations. Sometimes you have very low, like an intestinal foreign body, pretty low emotion because it's pretty finite. Got a tennis ball in there, just go get it, right? The other side of the spectrum then being where we have, the 20-year-old cat with failure, even the young dog with like leptospirosis, a young dog with a preventable disease who's now end-stage failure. So there's an emotional component to it. And then the third one is the physical component, and this is the patient. So we got money, we got caregiver, we got patient. There are 3 expenses in our profession, and the physical expense is the greatest expense that anyone pays. You can always make more money and you can always see therapy. But when it comes to the physical expense to the patient, there's very little that we can do if that is a very high expense to that animal. We got opiates, we got treatments, we got hospitalization, we got a lot of this stuff. And what I tell people is, I said, I don't want to talk about money. I don't want to talk about your emotional state because I'm not certified in that. I said, I want to talk about the actual physical expense of your patient in going through what we're about to go through. Some people think that, like heat stroke. Some people think like hospitalization with IV fluid therapy and some of these things. Some people think that's actually a really, really high physical expense, where they're like, oh my God, they're in a clinic and they're not going to know anyone around here. I said, no. Physical expenses, heat stroke isn't the best example because heat stroke has actually be really significant. But anyway, it's probably a bad example. But just saying there are times where the physical expense is low. So sometimes you have to educate them to what is a very high physical expense, where we have that 20-year-old cat, and we're happy when cats can get to 13 to 14, 15, 16 years old. So 20 is pretty much at life expectancy. So now we're talking about 3 to 5 days of hospitalization, several meds, and I say it's not the treatments that's the physical expense, because treatments are supposed to make you better. The physical expense is, what does it feel like to actually be in end-stage kidney failure with heart disease and having no ability to make a decision about what you get to do with your body?
Right.
That's the state of animals. It's always this other party who's making decisions regarding the care of that patient. So that's why I say, I don't care about money. I said, money will become part of the conversation.
Right.
I said, the emotional expense is something that you family, or if you call someone, you got a sister, you got a sibling, or a significant other, whatever happens, you guys can talk about that. I said, but my job here is to bring the animal's voice into this conversation and to talk about that physical expense. What does that mean to this animal?
Right.
And if we get to the point where we start to talk about that physical expense, and it's like, I would never consider putting them through treatment.
Right.
Money never comes a part of the equation.
Right.
And that approach has helped at so many different levels. Those cases who come in where they don't have what is it, 2 dimes to rub together, and they're like, oh, I just I don't have any money. I really wish I could treat. Da, da, da. I said, stop talking to me about money right now. Let's talk about these 3 expenses. Let's focus upon what's happening with your patient right now. And I said, money will come up. I said, we have so many different financing options, more than any clinic you'll see in the area. We have so many different things that way. Let's do this first. And by the end of the conversation, they're like, oh, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
And I'm like, then why did we start this conversation with money? because that's
They're afraid.
They're afraid. That's the
Yeah.
business practice.
Right.
The business industry has brought us towards this payment method. So again, that kind of stems off of us talking about Caroline.
Yeah.
You know, is saying like when we start to talk about then veterinarians being faced with this, you know, in our clinic, the statistic is 1 in 5, just it's 24-hour care. We see lots of stuff for a lot of reasons.
Right.
But you know, when you start to get into that environment and it's like, how do I cope with this? And this case might not go the way that I want. This case might not go the way that I think it should go. And it's like, I. Take I out of it.
Yep.
Because I didn't talk about 4 expenses. We probably have 4 expenses. I think the emotional state of the veterinary team is one of the expenses, but paw health is fixing that.
Yep.
So it really has more to do with take yourself out of the equation.
Right.
Let's at least empathize with the emotional expense. Let's not completely disregard the financial expense, but let's get back to the fundamentals of who we are as veterinarians and technical staff on the actual true patient. And that's what comes to our core values is serve the patient.
Right. And just to circle the conversation all the way back to the beginning
Yeah.
is if you don't have that third element, how can you truly get aligned?
Probably can't.
I don't know if you can.
No.
At least on the patient care,
Yeah.
like fur baby to working animal spectrum.
Yeah.
If you're not understanding what's happening in their world,
Yep.
I don't actually think you can hit the same page to the point where you can talk about the emotional expense of the caregiver and you can talk about the financial expense.
Yep.
And then when you can't do those 2 things,
Yep.
then you have veterinarian team the expense. Because if
Oh,
you do
absolutely.
all 3 of those things, we did our job. Like,
Yep.
was it physically exhausting to have all of those things happen because there's a lot of time, work, and effort
Oh,
involved
yeah.
in all those things? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But Annie put it a great way after the weekend, the crazy weekend after Memorial Day.
Oh, yeah.
It was extremely physically exhausting.
Yep.
Extremely rewarding.
Yep.
There was no expense
No.
on the veterinarian team side.
Yeah.
It was a gain.
Yep.
Because we did all of
Yep.
those things
Yeah.
really, really well.
You
the
could
whole
see it in her
time.
eyes. She was rejuvenated.
Dude,
she
it
was
was
like,
awesome.
she was like, oh my God, it's working.
Yeah.
And it's actually working incredibly well. And everyone did they were supposed to do, and it was perfect.
It was perfect.
And it's like, yes.
And it was high stress.
High stress.
We were rolling
Yeah.
4.5 hour wait times at one point.
Yep.
And everyone was fulfilled by it.
Everyone.
There was no expense.
Yep.
Well, you have to have the other 3 variables included in that. As
Yep.
soon as you lose one of those 3,
Yeah.
if I don't make any money, I'm
Yep.
stressed as shit.
Yep.
If the caregivers are stressed
Yep.
and they don't, and
They're
we're not,
putting that emotion on
they're
you.
putting it right on me.
Yep.
And then I don't know how to deal with that.
No, because I can't even deal with my own.
Right. And then if I'm not communicating how this patient is the physical expense of this
Yep.
patient, we're never going to see eye to eye.
No.
Ever.
No.
So in terms of culture
Yep.
and like this idea of holding yourself on a higher level and being trained to do that, what does that do? That completely removes you from the perspective because I just know it.
Yeah.
So you should listen to me.
Right.
And then you should pay me.
Yes.
Don't get stressed.
Don't get stressed. Right.
Don't tell me about your stress.
Yeah.
I'm going to fix it.
Yes.
Oh, well, and then when you can't,
Yeah,
then
and it
anxiety
doesn't.
comes out.
Right.
Right. But like that idea, that's just immediately the lack of humility. It breaks the system.
Yep.
When I can't engage you, when I don't understand different behavioral styles and different ways to communicate,
Yep.
I'm not going to get there. I'm not going to be able to talk to you to the point where you're going to listen to me
Yep.
and we're going to get to the same page.
Yep.
And the third one was that unified profession.
Yep.
Right? That's goes back to the team.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If I can't tell them
Yep.
all of that stuff and we're not on the same page and understanding our neutral position with all of these people,
Yep.
because if there's one person in the middle of this process that's like, I disagree with that.
Yep.
I don't think we should do that. Even if I'm silent about it,
Yep.
behavior changes,
Yep.
speed changes,
Yep.
demeanor, all of that stuff.
Performance.
And it's
Yep.
it's reading the room.
Yep.
And as soon as that negative energy hits the room,
Yep.
everything slows down.
Done.
And then all of it starts to crumble.
Yep.
Just like that.
Yep.
And we don't, not all of those things have to happen at one time.
No.
One of those things can break the entire system.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why they're the 3. That's why I have them in that culture,
Right.
culture thing is they are so incredibly important.
Right.
And I think, we overlap a lot of these different points. Like you said, the 2 main points for fixing culture,
Yeah.
safety and vulnerability,
Yeah.
is I think, what we've done over the last 3 years is, I was talking to the CEO of my old employer, and I was saying to her, I was about 1.5 years into ownership, maybe 2 years in ownership, And, I said, I understand that being an owner is difficult. And I said, there's a lot of things that we're doing that are different than a lot of their clinics. I said, but, I kind of see a lot of problems with the tradition. I said, but it's difficult. I said, but I was sort of expecting it to be a little bit harder. And I said, why isn't it as hard for me as it is for other veterinarians? And we kind of talked about a few different points. She asked her own questions and rebuttals and so on and so forth. And she says, oh, that's the answer. I'm like, what? She's like, well, you're not afraid to fire people.
Yeah.
And I was like, why would I be afraid to fire people? And she's like, because most people are afraid to fire people. And the statistic is in the first year, I fired half the staff. Second year, we fired 25% of the staff, and we were this close to it happening again, but we had maybe people saw the writing on the wall, and it was just an immediate fix of culture. Maybe you coming on board, and maybe all these things started to align where we were catching things before they completely started to fall through. But it comes right back to, like you said, safety and vulnerability.
Yeah.
We got rid of people who weren't willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah, it's not safety. It's not to say that they weren't able to be safe, because you provided, through extensive amount of effort, the facilities to be vulnerable.
Correct.
Like most, it was just a matter of, are you going to do it? Are you shit or get off the pot?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And absolutely, it's it's sometimes there's just a barrier where people just aren't going to do it.
Well, and I think it's from sort of negative experiences.
Yeah.
And the thing is like I think in firing, I think what we look at in that cultural world, because again, there's whole other things we got to talk about in the core values, but just still staying on the culture. Anyone who quit or anyone who we fired, I could see why they failed in this environment. And part of it was I didn't always have the energy to fix all of those pieces. Saying, oh, well, you've been ingrained in this negative culture for the last 10 years of your career. I'm now asking you to change. I'm now asking you to not just change who you are, because you can still be yourself.
Right.
But the reality is you probably aren't yourself right now.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. And how much is it going to take for me to kind of come back? And so what we did was we actually, I got to think, I'm not sure. Between people quitting or firing or whatever it happens to be. Even thinking back, I don't think there was a circumstance where I didn't disagree with those people leaving the company, because it's not just we're taking this business in a different direction, is that we're taking the industry in a different direction, and in taking it in a different direction, unfortunately, there's going to have to be losses, which I don't like the thought of people losing their jobs. That's not the intent of this. But in order for us to fix three massive problems between culture, talent, and service, broken eggs.
Well, it's just buy-in.
Yeah,
that was always the issue, right?
Yeah, buy-in was always a big problem.
When it came down to it, like you had the structure.
Most people thought it was crazy, but most people think I probably still am crazy.
Yeah, there are days I think you're crazy, Carlo. It's just what it is.
Which I probably am.
That's okay.
Yeah,
it's the crazy ones that move the things forward. But I think when it comes to those three chunks, it's like you would be even before the written description was there, you would be able to describe it verbally and
absolutely. It was always in my head,
right?
Which was insane.
And if it was just like they just didn't grab onto it, or even so much like maybe you don't get it, that's okay,
right?
But don't stop it,
right? Yeah, don't. Exactly.
You don't even necessarily have to be fully bought into the idea, but do not pump the brakes.
Right. Yeah, we don't have the time to pump brakes.
No.
Yeah.
So as soon and really what that is it's buy-in. If you're not bought in, you're going to be like, well, that's not going to work. And as soon as that thought enters your head, it's like, well, are you number one? You can be critical,
absolutely,
for the sake of problem solving and advancing.
Yeah, please.
But if you're just saying that's not going to work, that's not how this has ever worked.
Yep.
We do this way because this is how it's always been done.
Right.
That is my least favorite phrase in the entire world.
That's
how it's always been done.
Yep.
That makes me want to do it another way.
Absolutely.
And when that thought enters anyone's mind here, it's just, when are they going to leave?
Yeah, exactly.
And when are they gone? Because it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I had made the joke, I think, year one of ownership, as I said, I want people to be so comfortable with change that they can't even become comfortable with the toilet paper we have in the clinic. I want them to understand that everything is on the table for change.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said, okay, fine, let's talk about corporate hierarchy. Let's talk about any of that. is what I had said is that, from where I'm at, from the administrative team, from, any sort of, our 4-core team, whatever it happens to be, we talk about the red stop button.
Yep.
Toyota, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Toyota.
Yes.
Toyota's red stop button.
Yep.
Anyone on any part of that chain at any point in time say, there is a problem right here, red stop button, we need to fix this problem.
Yep.
We're not talking about buy-in to saying you can't critique. Buy-in is saying you are so motivated towards the success of you as a person, you as a team, you as a company, as the patient care circle, the caregiver, the patient, and then us as the medical team. Buy-in is saying you're just buying into the theory of a better life. You're buying into the theory of it can be better. You're buying into the idea of tradition is one path, corporate medicine is another path, paw health is the other path.
Right.
And that's, I think, I always forget about buy-in because it's always in the back of my mind where I'm just like, well, yeah, of course I'm 100% buy-in. Why would I think twice about buy-in? But then you forget. You're like, oh, well, people don't just automatically buy in. But the people who are still with us from the beginning bought in right away. Right away.
And the ones that advance
Yep.
in an exceptional way buy in
Right away.
and they just steer into it.
Yep.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like the car's a little bit out of control.
Yeah.
But I mean, we live in Wisconsin. How do you get out of a snowy skid?
Yeah, right.
You hit the gas.
Right.
You don't hit the brakes.
No, you drive
You
through
power through it.
Yeah, and you stir, and you don't oversteer. You turn,
just
and
control it.
Just control it.
Little bits.
Yeah.
But you stay on the gas because as soon as you hit the brakes, you're out of control.
You're out of control.
You're out of control.
Yeah.
You lose it.
Yeah. And actually, truthfully, in that first year of ownership, I was so mad. I was so mad the first year of ownership because where I had gotten to that point through the acquisition of the practice, the development of infrastructure, which was still in its infancy, but a lot of that development is almost everything I was because of the feedback I got from the staff. Technicians and medical support and the front end staff were always comfortable approaching me. This is broken. What can you do about it? And they saw results. I'd be like, I don't know. I'll see what I can do about that.
Right.
I'll see if I can fix that. Sometimes it fell in the deaf ears of the office manager they had. The owners of the clinic were always receptive to my ideas, but it was always the implementation part. They were always cool with the owning it and the solutions, but implementation was always because of the link to implementation, which the office manager at the time, we had a hard time with implementation.
Yeah.
So that was always my thing was Carlo was the guy who could get stuff done. And sometimes I would come up with the solutions if all they had was the problems. I buy the place, everyone stops talking to me.
Yeah.
Why is everyone done talking? Well, he's owned the place. He's going to run this is his business, and we're not going to talk to him anymore. I'm like, since when has that ever been the dynamic? That has never been the dynamic.
Yeah.
I need input from everyone all the time. And I think that's part of that buy-in, is just saying, no, I'm going to mess stuff up as I go along. That's what it is, because we have to figure out what solutions are and are not going to work. But I think in the end, this was a very, very extended explanation of culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think to look at the culture of the veterinary profession, this is one of the 3 biggest problems that we face in our current industry. And by God, we have a solution.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. You take all those busted parts.
Yep.
All of those parts are extremely difficult to buy into.
Absolutely.
A lot of our industry is built with those 3 parts in the chunks.
Yep.
So you and I both say, well, fuck that.
Yep. Let's make number 3.
Let's make number 3. Let's make some solutions.
And let's get to the other side of that hurricane.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. All right. We're going to wrap this one up.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Appreciate the time, man.
Yeah. I think next time we'll focus on service and talent from a lack of infrastructure and loss of self-worth. We might kind of slide a few things in there, but let's talk about some problems before we get to the solutions.
Got to know the state of things before we start fixing them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you, everyone who watch today or listen, however you kind of
however you're consuming.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next week,
right.
and
stay tuned for more.
Yeah.